record and then share my screen. Okay. So we already finished the first class, time class discussion. Okay, so make sure to clear the idea about instance variable, instance method, class variable, class method, create object, constructor, public, private, encapsulation. Okay, so of the terms. So today we will first take a look second example. The second example, so I will try to explain how to use some existing class. Okay, like one of the class you already learned and you use quite a lot, string class, that you already use it a lot. And the scanner that we also learned. Is it? And today let's take a look another class. So this is in Java, Java FX. Later on we will learn. Okay, it's about GUI. Okay, how to create like a button, input box, those stuff. And within Java FX we have the one of the basic component to build a shape, is it any kind of geometric shape, is a point, is it? And in two-dimensional, it's a 2D. It's a point, like a point X, is it? This is X coordinate, Y coordinate is a Cartesian coordinate, is it? This is origin, is it? So it's identified by its X and Y coordinates, a point, is it? X and Y, is it? So in your math, you learn this concept, is it? So point. And in the Java FX.geometry package, we have a class called point to 2D. So that class already created for us, is it? So if we want to use, you need to import that class. So you need to have this import statement, is it? Import this class and the semicolon, okay? This is a statement. So once you import this class, then you can go ahead to use it, okay? So next, let's see, how do we use it? The first part is just scanner. With a scanner, you can input the X and the Y value. So here we just skip that part, okay? And if you're interested after class, you can read the code regarding that part. And here, just to simplify. So for the point, like I just showed, it need X and Y value, is it? So one of the constructor in the point 2D. So this is a point to D class. Is it point to D class? The point to D class, and just think about like I just draw. Is it a point P? Is it? And in Cartesian coordinate system, is it has X coordinates and Y coordinate. So if you know X and Y coordinates, you know the point, basically, is it? So then that's very nature, is it? So in point 2D class, one of the constructor, it has a number of constructor, later on we will see, okay? But one of the constructor, it takes 2 arguments, okay? So this constructor takes 2 arguments. 2 arguments, is it? The first is 1, second is 2. So basically in this case, this is 1 and this is 2, is it? So it's 1 and 2, is it? It's P1. So in this diagram, is it? So you call the constructor, is it? Plug in with its X and Y value and you create a new point and you assign it to P1. Is it P1 variable? Okay. Then P1 reference to a point to, so P1 reference to a point to D object. is it? An instance of a point 2D, is it? And same thing for P2, is it? P2 also called point 2D constructor, it says 3,5, is it? So let me clear this part out. So what it looks like is you have a P1 here, is it? So it's a 1 and 2, is it? And then you have P2, maybe here, is it P2? It's 3 and 5, is it X and Y, is it? Okay, so you have these 2 points, is it created? And in point 2D class, so here you see, and I want to see what the output is going to be look like, is it? About this point 2D. So point 2D, it has a method called toString. So this is its instance method. Instance method, is it? And the same thing, toString P2, you can also call that instance method. So both of these toString, what it does, it returns a string. And that string will contain their coordinate information, okay? So that's one thing. And then the second, next let's take a look. Here you call P1 dot distance, and then you plug in P2, is it? So that means we can kind of reverse engineering thinking, is it? So so point 2D is a class. Is a class. So basically, if we write it, it's going to look like this: public class point 2D, is it? But we don't know the instance variable, is it? Instance variable hidden, is it? So we don't know what they look like, is it? What their name is, we don't know, is it? But we do know they have a instance method called toString. By we use this, we know it has a method called public string, toString, is it? And it will do something and return a string. So anyway, there is a function looks like this, is it? Then questions about this distance. So what do you think the distance should look like? Anyone knows the answer about this distance within the 2D class, point 2D class? So definitely it's a instance method. So it's a public. What's the return type? What's the method name called? What's the parameter? And as to how it's implemented, we don't need to care. So who can tell me about this 3 question mark, about this distance method? Who knows the answer? So what the distance method return type should be? What do you think? Can you guess?
Double?
Pardon me? Pardon me? Pardon, what?
You return the type double?
Double? Yeah, very good. Very close, probably. We can go back to check. Very good. Yeah, because the distance, is it P1, P2? Is it? So in math, you know how to find the distance between 2 points if you know their x, y values, is it? And what's the name of this method? The second question mark?
Distance?
Oh, very good. Yeah, it's called distance. Okay, now the third question mark, parameter. What the parameter type should be?
Point 2D object.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so the type should be point 2D. Is it something? We don't know. Is it exactly? Is it in that class? But anyway, the type is point 2D. Yeah, so you all get it. Is it? So this is a method point. So anyway, to find the distance, is it? So in math, you know how to find it. Is it? And then next, let's take a look at the next method. Then it's just in the system data print as it print the distance. So here this method find to the distance between 2 points. Is it? Okay, then the question is this dot distance is who is the owner of this distance method? In this case. Who?
P1.
Yeah, it's P1, is it? It's P1s. Okay, so we need to be careful here. It's called P1s. And then next, let's take a look at the next line. Here we have P1 dot midpoint something. Is it? So this tells us what? Tells us it's also okay in that public class point to D, is it? We don't know the hidden part. Anyway, the public part we do know. There is something called midpoint instance method, is it? So regarding this midpoint, so it's public, is this because you can access it in main. So the same question, what's going to be the return type? What's the method name? What's the parameter?
Double, midpoint.
Double, okay, hold on, okay, let me get this. You said this is double, first one. Second one?
String.
Second, the name is called what? This one?
Oh, I thought it should return a string if it's toString.
No, not a two-string. Don't worry about two-string part. I'm just asking you this part, the first, this block. This block P1 dot midpoint. So
Midpoint.
it's an instance method. This instance method, someone just told me that the return type is double. My next question is, what's the name of this instance method? The name of this instance method? What is it?
Midpoint.
Midpoint, very good. Yeah, midpoint. Midpoint. And how about the parameter type?
Point to the object.
Yeah, point to D, very good. Point to D. Okay, then the question is, just think about this. So I just write double. Is it, you said the return type is double, is it? Return type, so what is midpoint? So let's see. So you have the coordinate system, X, Y. Oh, is it? We have that P1. And then we have this P2. Is it P2, P1? What is a midpoint definition between 2 points? It's you find something in the middle. Is it? You find some point in the middle. Is it? Right in the middle between P1 and P2. So is double going to be a correct answer for this, for my star draw here? What do you want to get for this star thing I draw there? So just think about what you should retrieve. You should.
To the point to the object.
Yeah, so this should be a point. Is it? A point to the object. Is it? For that time. So is double going to be correct? The answer for the return type? So no, is it? That's wrong. So what then should be the return type? The return type?
I guess you could
Object.
do an array or list or string.
The list, an array, or a string? What? No, this midpoint, just like what I draw, is it? You just need to find the midpoint. In math, it's pretty simple, is it, for you to find the midpoint? So then when we write in programming language, is it this midpoint need to tell you what the midpoint is it? So what's the return type here?
Is it point to the?
Very good, very good. Yeah, it should be a point to D, okay? So it's the object, the class type. Is it? Because you're going to get a midpoint, this one. Is it? This is a midpoint, it's a point, Is it? In that diagram I just draw. The point, who can represent point? Point to D. Is it? Point to D. Yeah, so this class, or this method, instance method, it returns a midpoint. One of the parameters is also midpoint. Is it? Okay, so this will give you a point to D object. Is it? Point to D object. So this toString is whose toString? Arrays toString, strings toString, whose toString?
Point 2D.
Yeah, this toString is point to D's. Point to D's. Okay, which one? P1's, P2's, whose? This toString is who is the owner of this toString? Okay, let's come back here.
The returning
Midpoint.
object.
Who? Midpoint. Who is the owner of midpoint? Midpoint method. Who is the owner?
P1.
P1. Yeah. Okay. P1. Then toString. Who is the owner? Someone just answer. Is it?
Oh, 2D.
Yeah, it's some point to D object. Is it? Some point to D, not P1, not P2. Is it this asterisk? Is it? Huh? See, waiting room. Hold on. Let me admit all. Okay, so some midpoint. So you can see, you can do the dot. Is it? This we call chained call. Chained call. Is it? Okay, so that is fine. Is it? So now we understand this class, kind of. Is it? So you see over here, and in this project, as if you take a look here, we only have this main function, main methods program. We don't have the class definition, is it? And we don't need that, is it? Because why? Because here I already import that class and I can then just go ahead directly use that class, is it? Okay, so next, let's show you something like this. Okay. And Java has official document. It's called doc.oracle.com, is it? And over here, all we discuss is Java 8. Java 8, okay. Java 8 classes. So if you take a look, you will see it gives you very clear definition about point to D class. The from Java FX geometry package, is it? And so it gives you, okay, this class name is called Java 2D, and so this is a good reference point, okay? And then it also tell you what's the field name, is it? And the constructor, is it? Here it says, okay, that's the constructor. Oh, it only has this single constructor, is it? And it has some instance method, is it? Add, is it? And let's see the midpoint, is it? Did you see? We have that midpoint, is it? And the midpoint return what? Return a point to D, is it? And it's plug in what? Plug in X and Y, is it? That, oh, this is another midpoint. I'm sorry, not our. What our midpoint? We use the second one, midpoint, return a point to D object, is it? And it has a single parameter, a point, is it? And we also have this midpoint. It takes X, Y value, is it? And returns a point that lies in between this point and the specify, is it? So this X, Y is basically another point, X, Y value. Do you still remember what do we call this? We have two midpoint method here. They are exactly the same name, but their parameter list is different, is it? And so they have same name, but a different, we call it a different signature. What do we
Overload.
call this? What?
Overloading.
Very good. Yeah, it's called method overloading. Okay, so keep this keyword in mind. Okay, method overloading. So you see the midpoint exactly like what I just discussed, is it? Okay, let's scroll down. Midpoint, the other one is called distance, is it? If you take a look, is it? We also have the distance method, is it? And it returns a double, it's a 0.2D, is that we have another distance, is it? So yeah, so it's exactly as what we just discussed. And let's go back to that class, to that example. So this is my example, is it? And then let's see, in Java, let's see, if you right-click the class, and you can also see its source. So here is, because Java is open source, is it? So you can also find the official point2D class definition, public class point2D, is it? You can also see this, is it? It gives you get function and the distance, is it? And the second distance, is it? So it gives you the method and its implementation, is it? And what's that? The other one called midpoint, is it? Where's the midpoint? Yeah, midpoint, is it? Midpoint, is it? It gives you, so in your code, if you want, you can also see something like this, okay, to just go to source. Okay, so we are done with this example. And then let's go back to, I need to get the other second example up here. Let me need to close them because otherwise too many. I don't know which one it is. Hold on. Too many. Okay, then let's see. Is this the correct one? This is the correct one. This is the correct one. Okay. Then let's take a look at our next example. Okay, then let's see. Over here, so based on what we just discussed, is it? Then I try to kind of reverse engineering, is it? I create a point2D class myself, okay? So in this class, it's a public class point2D, is it? And I have two instance variables, is it, for X and Y, is it? And because we have that constructor with X and Y coordinates, so I create a constructor as an explicit value constructor. And I just assign the parameter, is it, argument to my instance variable, is it? So this is constructor quite straightforward. Okay, nothing new here. Okay, so next let's see. You remember we have that toString method, is it? So here I also provide the toString method and returns a string. Okay, so what it return? I do string formatting, is it? What my output is going to look like something like x equals 1, is it? And y equals 2.0. That's my output is going to look like, is it? So here is a formatted output, is it? Formatted output. So this is, so percentage means you're going to do formatted output, is it? And F means it's floating, is it? And how many decimal point you want, is it? And this first percentage maps the first variable, is it? And the second one is going to map the second one, is it? My, okay, so that's, so for string, if you want to generate a formatted string, you can call string.format. Okay, then you can specify the formatting, etc. And the dynamic, because mx and my going to change. Okay, so this is a toString method. And the next one, this is going to be important, okay, because later on we will see this a lot. Equals method. So here I provide a equals instance method. It return either true, false, etc. And its parameter is a point to the object. So what here I want to do, I want to compare myself with another point, is it, to see if both of us have the same x and y coordinates, is it? So over here, what you compare, is it, you just compare yourself, is it? Basically, this is that this dot mx, is it? And we just skip this, is it? So you compare yourself with whose? This mx is another's, it's from the parameter, is it? And the same thing, you compare the y values, is it? Y value. So what this equals compare? It compare to point to the objects. Be careful, okay, it's their contents. Okay, if both of them have the same contents, the definition based on the method definition is x coordinates and the y coordinates values. That's what you try to compare, use this equals, okay, equals. Okay, so that's this one, equals. And then let's take a look at the distance. Is it, the distance return double exactly like what the point to D class, and the parameter is another point to D, is it? And for distance calculation based on your mass, is it, you know it's x1 minus x2, is it, and square, is it, and plus y1 minus y2, is it, square, and then square root, is it? That's how you find the distance between two points, is it? So we follow exactly the same, is it? And then you do square root. The square root you need to call from the math package, the method. Okay, this method. Okay, then here there is a very good question I want to ask you guys. Based on what we wrote here, this SQRT method. So is a instance method or it's a class method. So who knows the answer? This SQRT method from the math package or math class. This should be math class. We have that math class. Is it? So you have a class called public math or public class math. Is it? And in that class, is it, you have a method called SQRT. Is it SQRT supposed to be public? Some return type, maybe double, is it? Double SQRT and something, is it? So my question is this correct based on how you call this? Think it really hard.
So it should be instance method?
You think it's instance method? If it is instance method, then the question is, did I have any math objects here? Because math is a class. Did I have any math objects here? any mass object here? Do we have any mass object?
No, I think
Yeah.
class method.
Yeah. So it should public. You should also have that static. Okay, so this method is a class method. Is it? It doesn't have any mass object. Is it? You just call the class, then dot. Is it? It's the class name, then dot. Is it? Then dot. You don't have the object, so it's different. Object dot. That's different. Is it? So this is a class method. SQRT, okay? So anyway, that's just some side notes here. Okay, so this distance is quite straightforward to understand, is it? Okay, then let's take a look. Here we have interesting thing. Okay, here I have another distance method defined. This time I have two parameters. I pass in 0.1 and 0.2, is it? I still return double. But what? This time I have static. Is it? I have static. What's the difference between this one and the one we just discussed? The other distance method. What's the difference between these two distance methods? Anyone knows the difference between these two?
I think the second one is class method, and when we call, we will call point to the dot distance, and we don't need to call the object. And like we call point to the dot distance, and then pass to point P1 and P2.
Yeah. Very good, very good. This is class method. The first one is what? Instance method. Okay, that's instance method. For the first instance, you need to have an object. Is it? For the second one, we don't need an object to call it. Is it? But for the first one, you just plug in 1 point, because the other, you still count 2 points, because the distance needs 2 points. Is it? But the second point is through parameter. The first point is what? It's the owner of this method. Is it? Versus the second distance. Second distance doesn't belong to any point. It belongs to the class. Is it? So when you call it no owner, there is no owner. Is it? It only has what? Has 2 parameters. You need to plug in 2 points to the method. Okay, so that's the major difference. Okay, so here. Okay, then same thing for the midpoint. Is it? To calculate midpoint, okay, this is return. The return type is a point to D class. Is it? Parameter is a point to D. Is it? And then you just find the midpoint. So you need to calculate its X and Y value. Is it? Divide by both. Is it? And what here? Because you're going to return a new object. Is it a new object? So you need to call what? Call constructor. Is it? To create a new point, and then you're going to return this guy. Is it? Return this guy. Okay. So this is about this class. We kind of understand. Is it? Then let's go to the main to take a look. Okay, in our main, same thing. We have this 2 point created. Is it? Created. And then same thing, we call the toString, nothing new. Is it? And then when we call the first distance, did you see? This is P1's distance. P1 is owner. Is it? And you plug in P2. Is it? Plug in P2. Okay, so this is this distance. Then let's see here. We do the same thing. We want to find the distance between P1 and P2, is it? This time I call the distance. I call this distance, is it? What I plug in? I plug in both P1 and P2, is it? And what's the dot here? It's not any object. It's what? It is class. Is it? So that's how you invoke class method. You need to specify the class name, then dot, then the method. Is it? And here you plug in both P1 and P2. Okay, both P1 and P2. Okay, so that's this distance, the invoking of both distance. And then next, let's see, we need to find the midpoint. Is it midpoint between P1 and P2? Is it? So how do I do that? I call P1 dot midpoint P2. Is it? And because I want to know what's the midpoint, so that's I call toString. Okay, so here's the question. This toString is whose toString? P1's, P2's? Who is the owner of this toString? P1?
Return an object, point to D.
Very good. Yeah, no, it's not this, not this. Is it? This toString is what? Is a midpoint. Is it? It's a midpoint of P1 and P2. Is it? It's whatever returned. Okay, so be careful. Okay, then let's see. Let's see here. You remember that equals method. Is it? Equals method is a instance method. Is it? And the owner in this case is P1. Is it? You want to compare with P2 point. Is it? And over here you compare their coordinates. Is it? And so definitely, what do you think this is going to be returned? True or false? This equals return true or false?
False.
Yeah, returns false. Is it? Because P1 and P2 are not the same point. Is it? Okay, then let me change this. Okay. I should be able to type here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me do something like this. New, then point to D with 1 and 2. If I call this, what does this mean?
It will return true.
This will return true, is it? Yeah, so very good. This then will, this will return true. Is it return true? Okay, so we understand this. Now my question is clear. Oh, I cleared. Okay, then let's do something like this. Hold on. Okay. Suppose what I don't use this equals. I want to do something like this. P1 equal new point to D 1 2. Then if I do this, it's return true or false. Equal.
Probably false.
Probably, okay, you guess it correct, yeah. This is false. Anyone knows the answer why this is false?
Well, it's two different objects.
Very
They're
good.
not same. They
Yes,
have different memory allocation, right?
Yeah, very good. That's a very good answer. Okay, so you remember previously we discussed is it stack memory, heap. Is it? So P1 point to that 1, 2. Is it? We call new point 1, 2. Is it? And what is this new point? It's another thing. Is it? And there is no name. Is it? Anyway, it's this guy. Is it? So when you do equal equal, this compares what? Compare address, always a reference. And of course, they locate at 2 different locations. Is it? That's for this comparison, okay? And the equal, this equals what it compares. So go back, P1, is it? So this is stack. And here we have that heap. So you have that 1, 2, is it? And then we call another new point to D, 1, 2 again, is it? They have exactly the same value, is it? But these 2 at 2 different reference. They are 2 different reference, so they are at 2 different location, heap memory location, is it? But they have the same contents at 2 different location, but have same contents. That's why the equal is considered true. Okay, considered as still as true. Okay, so we need to be very careful here. Okay, very careful here. Very good. And then now let's go back here. Okay, so go back here. And we discussed the midpoint is a instance method. Okay, instant method. And now I want you to write a class method of midpoint. How do you write that? Anyone know how to write a? So here the question is, can you write a class method midpoint? What it will look like? Can anyone tell me kind of how to do it?
So would you do public static?
Public static,
Point 2D.
point to D,
Midpoint.
midpoint.
And then you have to do point 2D with 1 point, point 2D with another point.
Yeah.
And then basically follow the same as what's in there. Just replace like the first MX with whichever you listed as the first point, like
Yeah.
point 1 MX, and then the other would be point 2 MX.
Yeah, suppose we call it 1 dot then, is it? And then Y should be 1 dot, is it? And here we should have static, is it? And we have another over here called point to D1, is it? Yeah, and then what? Everything else should look the same, is it? Okay, so suppose we have this defined. And then let's go back to main. Then in main, suppose now I want to call not the P1 dot midpoint. I want to call that class method. What should I do here? So because this midpoint is P1, now I want to call that the new one that we just generated, the class one. What should I do then here? Anyone have any idea?
If you use class, you shouldn't use like P1, you should do point to D dot something.
Point to D, then what? point to D, then what?
Name of the distance, I don't remember the name of the function.
Name of its midpoint, is it? What's the parameter?
P1 and P2.
P1 and P2, very good. Yeah, so you all get it? So make sure know the difference, okay, between class method and the instance method, okay, the instance method. I believe that's all the new material today. Okay, we went over quite a lot of new concept, and hopefully